If you roll the clock back to the early 1950s, you land in a very specific moment in American life. The war was over, the interstates were coming, and for a lot of families, long-distance travel didn't mean airports yet. It meant a big diesel coach rolling down a two-lane highway. This was the beginning of the golden age of highway travel, when a bus ride could still feel like a little adventure instead of just a way to get from A to B. Greyhound could see that future coming, and they didn't just want to be another bus company. They wanted a national symbol, something that looked like the future of America on wheels. Passengers were already gravitating toward coaches with big picture windows, higher seating, and a sense of style. If you could give people a better view and make them feel like they were gliding instead of bouncing, they'd remember that trip for the rest of their lives. GM had been quietly working toward that idea with two experimental prototypes, GX1 and GX2. They carried a split-level layout, wrapped in those smooth, flowing Raymond Loewy lines. Staggered roof, two-tier body, a profile that looked more like an ocean liner than a bus. The goal was simple and bold. Build the highway equivalent of a Vista Dome rail car. For Greyhound, this wasn't just a new model, it was a strategy. Stand apart from trailways and the small regional lines. Put a distinctive shape on every postcard, every billboard, every "See America from a Scenicruiser" ad. And for GM, it was a chance to prove that Detroit could marry daring design and advanced engineering in one unforgettable machine. For all its beauty, the Scenicruiser carried a mechanical secret that would haunt it from the very first mile. The coach was powered not by one engine, but by two Detroit diesel 471s, mounted side by side. On paper, it sounded ingenious. Small, lightweight engines working together to produce the horsepower Greyhound wanted. In practice, it created a drivetrain unlike anything the industry had ever tried to maintain. The two engines fed through a fluid coupling and a specialized gear train that blended their output before sending it into a 3-speed transmission with an additional split range. It was clever, yes, but it was also complicated, sensitive, and stubborn. If one engine drifted even slightly out of sync with the other, the whole coach telegraphed it. Vibration through the floor, heat where it shouldn't be, and fuel consumption that could swing wildly from coach to coach. Then came the clutch system, an early electrically actuated control that was supposed to make shifting smoother and more modern. Instead, it earned a reputation for slow response and harsh engagement. Drivers complained about the lurching, the hesitation, the unpredictability. Greyhound heard those complaints loud and clear, and in the end, the entire fleet had to be retrofitted with a conventional mechanical clutch just to make the bus drivable day to day. But the real trouble wasn't only in the drivetrain. Structural cracks began appearing in the rear window band, a stress point right where the split-level design transferred load from the upper cabin to the lower frame. By lifting the passenger deck above the driver, GM had unintentionally created a twisting force that concentrated on a vulnerable seam. Enough buses developed visible cracks that it became impossible to dismiss as isolated wear. It was a systemic flaw, and for the mechanics who had to keep these machines alive, the Scenicruiser was a challenge from the start. Its 3-section monocoque body meant components were buried deep, access panels were tight, and many procedures required specialized knowledge or tools that most shops simply didn't have. Downtime stretched. Parts cost more. Training lagged behind. A coach that was supposed to be a showcase wound up spending far too much of its life parked inside a garage. In the end, the Scenicruiser wasn't undone by its looks. It was undone by its ambition. Beautiful, bold, and unmistakable, yes, but also over-engineered and under-tested. These early flaws didn't just cause headaches for Greyhound. They planted the seed for a future where no American manufacturer would dare build anything quite like it again. By the early 1960s, the truth could no longer be padded with optimistic memos or brushed aside as early production wrinkles. The Scenicruiser program was collapsing under its own weight, and Greyhound faced a decision no carrier ever wants to make. Either retire 1,000 nearly new coaches or rebuild the entire fleet from the inside out. What followed became the largest coach reconstruction effort in American bus history. Between 1961 and 1962, roughly 979 Scenicruisers were shipped to Marmon-Harrington for a complete mechanical overhaul. The heart of the redesign was drastic but necessary. Out went the twin 471 power plant and its temperamental coupling system, and in went a single Detroit diesel 8V71, the same kind of rugged V8 two-stroke that powered countless dependable coaches for decades. The original gearbox was removed as well, replaced with a Spicer 4-speed manual that drivers already trusted and mechanics already knew how to service. To deal with the structural fatigue, the rebuild teams strengthened the rear framework and reinforced the area around the rear window band, locking down the weak points exposed by the split-level design. And all of this came at a staggering cost. Contemporary estimates put the bill somewhere between $10 and $13 million, 1960s dollars. Adjusted to today's value, that's easily hundreds of millions poured into fixing a fleet that should have been the company's crown jewel. What was meant to symbolize American confidence had become one of the most expensive lessons in transportation history. The financial strain quickly turned into legal strain. Greyhound and GM traded blame, each pointing to design decisions, production shortcuts, and unrealistic expectations. Their once powerful strategic partnership, one that had shaped the American highway landscape since the 1930s, fractured almost overnight. The Scenicruiser didn't just fail mechanically, it ended GM's dominance in the intercity coach market. For Greyhound, the scars ran deep. After weathering a crisis of this scale, the company's appetite for radical engineering vanished. Revolutionary no longer sounded exciting. It sounded expensive. The dream that launched the Scenicruiser had come full circle, replaced by a sober realism that would define the industry for decades. If the mechanical problems and the costly rebuild revealed the Scenicruiser's weaknesses, the market delivered the final, unambiguous verdict. And that verdict was no more. The first and clearest sign came from GM itself. Hoping to refine the concept rather than abandon it, the company built a follow-up prototype, the PD4901 Golden Chariot. It carried the Scenicruiser philosophy forward, still dramatic in profile, still running 2 engines, but this time packaged into a high-floor layout with more power and more conventional underfloor storage. In theory, it was everything the Scenicruiser should have been. In reality, it went absolutely nowhere. Only one was ever built. No carrier ordered it. Not Greyhound, not Trailways, not a single regional line. The industry took one look at another dual-engine coach and quietly, decisively, walked away. The Golden Chariot wasn't just a failed prototype. It was a flashing red sign that the market had no appetite for this kind of complexity ever again. And even if you set the mechanics aside, the Scenicruiser's much-celebrated split-level layout didn't deliver where it mattered most: revenue. Yes, passengers loved the elevated view. Yes, it looked fantastic in ads, but it didn't add seats, didn't improve baggage capacity, and didn't speed up turnaround times at stations. The operating costs climbed, but the earnings per mile did not. Beauty alone couldn't balance the ledger. Then came the human factor, the part of the equation fleet managers always take seriously. Drivers never warmed up to the dual-engine arrangement. They could feel when the 2 power plants slipped out of sync, and they didn't like the extra thought required to manage the strange drivetrain. Mechanics liked it even less. Twice the engines meant twice the work, twice the troubleshooting, and twice the downtime. And when both the people behind the wheel and the people under the bus develop a dislike for a design, its fate is sealed. In the end, the Scenicruiser didn't just lose a technical battle, it lost the market's trust. And once an entire industry turns its back on a concept, there's no coming back. By the time the Scenicruiser rebuild program was winding down, Greyhound had already begun steering its future in a very different direction. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, the company quietly took control of a smaller but promising Canadian builder, Motor Coach Industries. That move changed everything. Instead of relying on outside manufacturers, with their own priorities, their own engineering philosophies, Greyhound now had a direct pipeline to a coach builder that could design buses around operational reality, not just styling dreams. And MCI's philosophy could not have been more different from the Scenicruiser experiment. MCI believed in one engine, mounted in the rear, simple, rugged, and familiar to every driver and mechanic in North America. They preferred a high-floor layout, which created massive luggage bays and a cleaner, stronger structure. Their bodies were modular, built for quick access and quicker repairs. And above all, MCI coaches were designed with the working driver in mind. Predictable handling, straightforward controls, and none of the mechanical trickery that had made the Scenicruiser such a handful. The results spoke for themselves. When the MC7 arrived in 1968, Greyhound adopted it as the natural successor to the Scenicruiser. Longer, stronger, easier to maintain, and powered by the proven Detroit diesel 8V71. The MC8 and MC9 that followed didn't just fill Greyhound's garages, they became industry standards, dominating American roads well into the 1990s. These were the coaches that carriers trusted because they made money, saved labor hours, and stayed out of the shop. And that ultimately is why the Scenicruiser dream died. Once Greyhound had MCI, it no longer needed GM. And without Greyhound, GM no longer had a market big enough to justify bold, risky, futuristic concepts. The entire industry, by choice or by necessity, shifted toward a model that was simpler, cheaper, and dramatically more reliable. In a world built on uptime and efficiency, there was simply no room left for another Scenicruiser. Even after its troubled service life, the Scenicruiser cast a long shadow across American coach design. GM's own Buffalo series, PD 4107, PD 4903, and their siblings borrowed the raised roofline and the sweeping, almost nautical profile, but wrapped those cues around a far more practical single-level structure. Other builders, too, quietly echoed bits of Scenicruiser DNA. Larger panoramic windows, a taller passenger deck, a silhouette that hinted at motion even when the coach was standing still. The industry didn't copy the Scenicruiser. It showed up in films, documentaries, and museum exhibits, often serving as shorthand for a more optimistic America. An era when the open road felt endless, and every mile held a bit of promise. Among enthusiasts, the Scenicruiser occupies a unique, almost sacred place. The few surviving units tend to be restored by bus nuts with enormous patience, because rebuilding one requires the kind of dedication usually reserved for antique aircraft or classic wooden boats. Parts are scarce, systems are idiosyncratic, and nothing about the bus comes apart easily. Collectors don't chase them for practicality. They chase them because they're iconic, unmistakable, and deeply woven into the nation's visual memory. And that may be the real heart of its legacy. The Scenicruiser was too beautiful to forget, but also too complicated to ever duplicate. America didn't build another Scenicruiser because the very things that made it legendary, the ambition, the engineering daring, the futuristic silhouette, also made it impossible to repeat. If this story brought back memories or taught you something new, give the video a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the machines that shaped America's roads.